This is the Fierce Heart Alliance featuring the Harmonic Virtues, a self-reflective practice to understand virtues based on the laws of the universe. We can apply these virtues to everyday life to fully participate in our personal evolution by cultivating resiliency, purpose, and harmony. Hi, I'm Summer Sophiamoon, and I've come here to heal myself and chew bubblegum. And I'm all out of bubblegum. So join me and my special guests as we share and learn how to love ourselves fiercely through self-care, explore the wisdom of the harmonic virtues, and grow our conscious community together. By listening, you are now a fierce heart too. Welcome to the Fierce Heart Alliance. Before we begin today's topic, I'd like to say thank you to our listeners. You're always welcome here. Thank you to the ancestors, spirit guides, and friends who are assisting us today. May these words be a force for good and timelessly infused with light and held in the frequency of rose quartz, spreading healing and peace around the world. May it connect both our consciousness and unconsciousness for the highest and most benevolent outcomes for all. If there's any words left unsaid, we trust in spirit to make it right and let it gently ease into our consciousness as necessary for understanding in our own time and our own way. And so it is. Thank you. Today's episode is the virtue of vibration. It's located on the inner level of the harmonic blueprint, and it's the first virtue of the metaphysical level, which are foundational elements for physical life and building blocks of our consciousness. The virtue combines both the universal law of vibration and the law of resonance. Virtues are lessons that can impact our everyday life and relationships. They are ever evolving, ever shifting, and developing as we mature. And like a beautiful garden, they require tending and some management to keep healthy and vibrant. The first part of the episode is we'll learn about the virtue, and the second half we'll learn how to work with the virtue. Today, my guest is Deborah Nucci. So, Deborah, you have a very rich history working with energy and your guides. I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts and experiences regarding vibration?
Well, everything is vibration, for starters. That's where we start from. Everything has a particular vibration, and that vibration can change based on our environment and what is also vibrating around us. Vibration is simply a frequency or an oscillation of a particular tone, if you will, if you're talking about it from a auditory point of view. If you're talking about it from a connective point of view, then frequency is, if you think about like attracts like, you're talking about if you have a frequency of, let's say, joy, whatever that frequency is, if you are feeling that and resonating that out into the environment, then that's going to attract that same vibration. Like a magnet, it's going to draw it in and it's going to bring that to you. The same thing works if you are around a vibration that is not of a positive intent. And I think about when you walk into a room and you have a particular sensation, you see somebody from across the room and you have a particular sensation, you go, oh yeah, I want to go meet that person. That's a vibration, and that's a vibration that you connected with that other person. Conversely, one thing to note about vibration is it's really not positive or negative. It's simply receptive or directive. And so you could walk into that same room, you could look across the room and you feel or see a person and you go, whoa, no, I don't want to be anywhere near that person. And so what is it that you determine from that far away in that nanosecond of a moment? It is your vibration touching their vibration and either finding compatibility, like, oh, want more of this, or, ooh, opposing, I don't want any of this. So in your daily life, that's really the basics of how vibration works. Like you either attracted to or repelled from.
Can you elaborate a little bit more of the receptive versus directive?
So when people think about, usually the frames that they use are positive and negative or good and bad. And the truth of the matter is energy simply exists and that vibration of that energy exists. It is neither positive or negative except in the electrical charge point of view,
Sure.
and therefore it's really not good or bad. However, it is either appropriate for the situation or not appropriate for the situation. And when we think about when we want to be driving something for results, so that is a directive energy. And when I think about the elements, which is a lot of where I'm based, I think about fire and air or wind, depending on the way that you want to frame that. So those are directive energies, directive vibration, as opposed to earth, which is receptive, it's receiving, it's grounding, or emotions, those are fluid and watery and changing. And so that is receptive. And so when you are thinking about vibration or energy, you want to think about what is the appropriate energy for this thing I'm doing. Well, if I'm let's say I'm wanting to forgive myself or somebody else. That's actually a receptive thing. That's a receptive vibration that you need to accept. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that relates to forgiveness, but the point being, you are wanting to access or be involved with that frequency or vibration that is going to get you where you want to go. You don't want to be pushing when you need to be pulling or receiving. Does that
And I
make
get
sense?
Yes, and I guess it's just depending on the person and the situation of what the what the situation calls for, whether you should be directive or receptive.
Right. And also it's about tuning in to what you feel in turn instead of thinking about what you should do. So it really, when I consider vibration and frequency, that's like the base level, and it's in the body. It's that's where it resides.
Mm.
Certainly there are vibrations that come from singing and things like that, but vibration is a body centered thing, at least for me. And so if I'm talking about it, vibration, from my thinking place, that's very different than if I'm talking about how it feels. And so when you are in a situation where, oh, should I push forward or should I pull back? Should I push forward or should I allow? Right? Those are the kind of the two things. It's tuning into your body to feel what direction it is indicating. And that means being attuned to your body, to understand, like having your own secret decoder ring for yourself about what your vibrations mean. And so even when we're talking about vibration, we do also talk about, stones and crystals have vibration, and they do. And you could say, there are people who say this particular stone has this particular vibration and it does this. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. It depends on how it interacts with your vibration as to what it truly can do. It's always going to have the same vibration, but how I interpret it, feel it, experience it, and how somebody else does can be very, very different.
It's a really good point. And that kind of leads me into my next question is, how do you use it in your daily life? I mean, I know you work a lot with crystals, just in your personal experience.
So vibration for me, I it has to do a little bit with both all the things that I'm experiencing in my body as to what that vibration is. It also has to do with, um, and I just lost my thought. Hang on here. Ask me that question again.
How do you use vibration and its principles in your daily life?
So, great question. So, for me, when I get stuck, usually I'm vibrating at a particular level. And that may be happiness, that may be joy, that may be anger, that may be some other frequency. And so let's take, I'm vibrating at a frequency that I don't want. let's say that, like I'm angry or I'm frustrated or something, and I know that I have to work or be in the outside world, not just in
Mm.
my own inside world. So how do I shift, change, rearrange that frequency and vibration that I'm in to a different one that is more useful for the situation that I'm in? First thing I have to know is tune into my body to figure out what vibration I'm feeling, give it a name if it has one, and then go, oh, what do I want instead? And that's kind of the key to shifting vibration, is that you can't really go, I don't want this vibration, because the more you do that, it's like you can't not think about what you don't want to think about without thinking about it first. So don't think of a pink elephant. And if I were to just keep saying that to you, you would have a construct in your head in some way that you do of a pink elephant, because you can't not think about what you don't want to think about without thinking about it first. So the key to that, the decoder ring, if you will, is to say, what do I want instead? How do I want to feel instead? And if you can identify that, so I want to feel, let's just say I want to be really opposite of feeling frustrated. I want to feel joy. So the first thing I might do, because I know this about myself, back to the decoder ring thing, is go, oh, my nephew Eric brings me joy. It's just like, even right now, thinking about him makes my entire being completely different. I see his face, I see his smile, I feel his resonance, and I am, and as you can hear from the tone of my voice, it has shifted. And I am now not where I was before. So I just keep moving on. Another way to shift vibration, and one of the keys to doing that, is the easiest way to change a state or a mood state of whatever state you're in. Easiest way to change that is to shift your physiology. So that means if you're crying or something like that, you're downward, you're facing downward. So stand up, put your shoulders back, look up if you're crying, those kinds of things. But the biggest shift you can have in physiology is with your breath. And so there is something that is called the physiological sigh. And I can't think of the guy's name now. We'll have to edit this in, who came up with it. But Andrew Huberman, who puts out a podcast, he's a neuroscientist, among other things, and really crazy cool guy. And he talks about it on his podcast. And basically, it is where you take a breath in, fill your lungs completely, and then right at the top, before you start letting it out, you take another gulp. And then you pause for a nanosecond at the top, and then you exhale. This is all through the nose, as slowly as you can. And that will take you from typically a sympathetic arousal state, which is fight, flight, or freeze, down to a parasympathetic arousal state, which is rest and digest, also called. So that takes maybe 2 minutes if you do that cycle. And it will dramatically, or can dramatically, shift where you are. So, and if you think 2 minutes is a very short period of time and you really can't do anything, try setting a timer and doing that breathing exercise for 2 minutes. It's a lot longer than you think.
It sounds like with that breath and that pressure, it's probably stimulating the vagus nerve. Something along
Indeed
those
it
lines.
is.
Yeah,
Indeed it is.
good stuff.
Yes, good stuff. And that shifts and changes your vibration. And I have a good example of that just recently, where I was sitting in on a conference call for something called Talent Review, where we talk about people's performance. And I was listening and I wasn't liking what I was hearing, and I was starting to get all jacked up. And it was like I could go BRB in the chat, put myself off screen and mute my mic and do a minute and a half of breathing. It's like, oh, okay, I'm back. Don't care. Move on. put the camera back on, put the, put the microphone back on, and here I am. And so you can in real time adjust, but you have to be attuned, going back to your own secret decoder ring, you have to be attuned to what your triggers are, what means for you, and understanding that what it means for you does not necessarily, usually not at all, mean what it is for somebody else.
That's
So
a
to
really good point.
superimpose your decoder ring on somebody else's code isn't going to work. That's where it's perception and paying attention and being present in the moment to be able to interact with somebody from a being there point of view.
Earlier, you talked about emotions and the vibration level of that. So, what is your take on Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness?
So that's really interesting work. I was introduced to it probably 25 years ago. And of course, the first thing people want to do when they understand that map of consciousness is, oh, rate me, rate me. Where am I on that map of consciousness? Which is kind of counterintuitive to the whole map of consciousness anyway, but we won't go there. Because it's normal and human and natural to do that. But as I look at that, and I do have that with me right now, I was pulling it out before we talked, is you take a look and you see that these emotions like shame, that calibrates at a level of 20, frequency of 20. And again, this log doesn't really correspond to frequencies as we think about them from like delta, gamma, alpha, theta. Though it's not that. It's his scale. But so you look at that. Shame has a vibration of 20, and then you go up to love, which is at, I want to say 500. And it's a really interesting way to think about the emotions that you spend time in. And what I mean by that is, if you know that the God view of shame is despising, and the life view is miserable, and the emotion is humiliation, and the process is elimination, then why do you want to stay there? And then again, we go back to that key that I identified. What do you want instead? And so let's maybe go up to, I want neutrality. That's like X number of steps up. I might not be able to make that shift very easily. That would be what I would consider a quantum shift. And that would be in healing work. Somebody's in this state. We want to strip away, let go of whatever it is that they need to catapult them into being able to open the aperture enough to get into that other state. So we might go up to apathy, from shame, go up one, guilt, and pop to apathy. And can we get there? And can we get from there to the next level? So it's a really interesting way to look at the debilitation of emotions that don't have a high level. And then when you look at that, you then have this whole thing of, oh, well, what do I want? And how do I begin attracting that into my life? Well, the first thing you have to do is be that. So I remember when I was fairly young and I, wanted to find my husband and all of that. And I don't remember who it was that told me, but it's right along with the you must be the change you want to see in the world. And it's like, if you want this in your relationship, you have to be that and be behaving like that. And then again, back to what I talked about before, is you basically put up a lightning rod and you are attracting that. So if you are warm and loving and generous, and those are the things you want in a mate, chances are you're going to resonate with only those people. Again, back to that idea about across the room, you go, jing, okay, that's a connect. Or you go, woo, no, that's not a connect. And in energy classes or when I'm teaching, I'll use magnetite stones for that as an example, because it's a very physical, like you can try to push them together. And if they're not in that magnetic, they'll fight. You will physically feel that. And then you can flip them and they'll go together like a shot. And so that gives people a really clear understanding of what that is like, if they don't understand that in their own body yet. And we aren't really brought up to understand those things. We aren't given energetic learning, most of us around, we're taught to, go to the bathroom and change our socks and tie our shoes, but we're not taught about these fundamental things that go on inside our energetic body and really end up being a way to control a lot of things.
Very well said. And for listeners who want more information about Dr. Hawkins' work, he wrote a book called Power versus Force, and I will put a link to it in the show notes so that someone can take a look at that. Or you can also Google Map of Consciousness, Dr. David Hawkins, and you'll be able to see it there. But it's really fascinating. I really love your point. And I've tried to work with this as well of, okay, I might be in fear or anxiety or anger, and what is the next step up from that, and what's a little bit more attainable? And that's part of the reason why harmony is in the center of the harmonic blueprint, because a lot of the universal laws talk about enlightenment, and that's not really attainable for us. So what's the next best thing? And harmony is the essence of balance, and it's the root of, so it's a little bit more attainable for us, and it's a little closer of hanging fruit for us to grab onto. And so that's a big reason why it's there.
I'd also like to point out a little something about balance. So often when we think about balance, we have an image in our mind of something that's actually balanced. Okay, balanced. That's a point in time, not balance. Balance is fluid and it is the state of constant adjustment. And I think that the best way you can envision that is to take a look at contortionists or hand balancers. Sophie Dossi, Google Sophie Dossi, and watch her when she performs, when she's doing her hand balancing tricks. And when they focus on her hands that are holding her entire body in some contortion up, you will see hundreds of micro movements of her hands, but she looks stock solid, when she's using her feet to do a bow and arrow, a flaming bow and arrow into a balloon when she's upside down, but she's shifting, changing, rearranging at all times in order to keep upright. So balance is a state of constant adjustment, and balanced is a point in time. Don't expect to stay there for very long.
That's so true. That gets into change and transformation in the next episode, but we'll put a pin in that and save that for later.
Righty-ho.
So you've started on a sound healing journey. Could you share a little bit about that and how that relates to vibration?
So I have spent a number of years working with vibration, from crystals, all kinds of different talk modalities, acupuncture, all of that, and was driven recently to, and this was from doing brainwave entrainment. So brainwave entrainment is about how to understand what brainwave frequency you are in. And when you think about that, beta is our normal brainwave state. It happens at about 12 to 30 hertz. So there's lots of calibration there in the beta state. And that's just your normal everyday working. when you want to move down into more focused state or state of flow, that's going to move, you want to move down into alpha state. And that's not our normal state. It's about 8 to 12 hertz. And in order to shift from that, you either want to understand and have spent time with your own self going, oh, okay, this is alpha, this is theta, this is, understanding those, so you can then use your breath to shift from that beta state into that alpha state, right? So I've done a lot of work in that, and that's super cool and fun. And binaural beats are some of the ways that you can get into that entrainment, but typically listening to music that is made at that rate, so you can shift and change and rearrange. So that led me to okay, so that's cool and I can do that, but I wonder what it would feel like with those crystal sound bowls. Understanding that this is a very high level, our bodies, the fascia in our bodies, tons and tons of quartz, little tiny bits of quartz throughout our body. And that is so that sets us up to be oscillators or receptors of whatever's going to come in, both from an energetic people around you point of view, music, sound of any sort. So I'd been wanting for some time to explore sound healing with those quartz bowls. And, hit by happenstance, I ended up at a woman named Molly Knight Ford. And she is a classical pianist who came to sound healing about 10 years ago. And she basically, you go to her little place and she has all the bowls out there, and you lay on a cot and simply experience for about an hour a guided. She also does vocal toning and light language, and basically guiding you through a healing session based on whatever it is that you want to work with, and you kind of just hang out there. I mean, one of the things I liked about it is I'm really attuned into my own internal body. I can feel things really deeply. And like, who doesn't want to go bask in somebody else doing all the work and you just feeling all the feels? Like, I want to sign up for that. So I did. And it was everything I thought and more. It is an all-encompassing experience in terms of, if you can just relax into and allow that sound to move through your body, it shifts, changes, rearranges things, I felt, at the DNA level. And some of the work, well, what we were working on was fear, like not a specific fear, but all encompassing fears in general: fear of aging, fear of death, fear of this, fear of that, just fear getting in your way. And I wanted to move out of that. I wanted to move into a more resourceful state. And here's another kind of fun fact, which is, you can be trained in all this stuff. You can teach this stuff. You can employ all this stuff. And sometimes you get stuck. And that is where I was, stuck in this massive amount of fear. And so it was really kind of magic. She uses a deck like I do, to pull a card before somebody comes. And the card that she had pulled was fear. And so I was like, okay, again, back to that resonance. I knew I came to you for a reason, like ding, 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 ding.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other thing is, I was able to just lay there. And at one point, I had an understanding that what I was working with was not only my own stuff in this lifetime, but also ancestral and probably down the maternal line. My mother recently died, and there was a lot of enmeshment and other crazy shit with her. And so I have still been working through that over the last year. And I think that there were still some things in there. And while I love my mother, I wanted to release anything that I had embodied from her back into the energetic field, where it could be transmuted and turned into something, and not living in me as a vibration that isn't mine. And, I can talk a little bit about me and not me as it relates to being an empath, but that's probably a whole nother thing. Anyway, so I knew that it was ancestral, or at least I had an inkling that it was. And at one point during the session, I I don't get images all the time, but occasionally I do. And I had this image of like this brass goblet, and I was this brass goblet, and I was caked in dirt and mud, like centuries of dirt and mud. And as she's talking and the gongs are gonging and my body's buzzing, and I am seeing and feeling this cracked hard dirt just come off, like just fall away easily without effort. And all that was left was this shiny goblet. And my interpretation was like, that's me without that stuff. And so that was one of the sort of pieces of magic, if you will, that I
Sure.
felt when that work occurred. And I also think, just like ripples in a pond or sound waves, if you've ever worked with any kind of sound bell or holding one in your hand and ringing it and waiting until the sound dissipates before you ring again, it's quite a long time that it keeps going now, wah 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 wah, until you can't hear it anymore. And so that was how I was for the 2 weeks following that, which is like, huh. And every now and then it's like, oh, and lots of small shifts. But one of the things I noticed first and foremost was I couldn't find where the fear was. And that took me back to uh, a YouTube thing that I was watching from Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was talking about, we all have fear. We have this fear in us. We have this, where it is, it's fear. But you also always have non-fear or not fear. And it was like ding 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 ding. That totally resonated for me, and it was like, "Oh, okay. I can momentarily connect to an immediate fear I might have, but then I can flip into, and where else is non-fear?" And what I find most often is that there's tiny parts of fear and shitloads of non-fear. You might want to edit that out. But but and so again, it's shifting your perception. So it made it easier for me to shift perception, both to clear away gunk that had been there for a while that I'd been unable to reach in any other method, even though all the methods deal with frequency and vibration, because everything is vibration, everything is energy. But it was just a different way to come at it. So I'm definitely going to be pursuing that more, and likely headed down into learning that myself, and uh, combining that with hypnotic language and all the other modalities I have to help people move from where they are to where they want to be.
And it's interesting you talk about the perception of that fear and non-fear, and I bet there's also the felt sense within the body of places where there is fear, and then there's places where there's non-fear,
Ding,
and
ding,
it's
ding.
it's a matter of your journey to find that in yourself.
Yes. And it is interesting that when I went looking for non-fear, back to watching the Thich Nhat Hanh piece, I was astounded, even before I'd done the work, I was astounded to find out there were more places of non-fear than there were of fear.
That's a nice revelation.
And so that I began to apply that, because all you want to do with learnings like that is generalize them into other parts of your life. And so when I would get angry, or when I would get upset, or when I would get any other thing, it's like, is that all I am? Is that all there is? It's like, no. Okay, well, what else is there? Oh, well, this is there and that is there. And that takes you those step vibrations to move you out of where you are to where you want to be.
Wonderful. My last question, as we're talking about resonance and vibration, The Fierce Heart Alliance is also very big about self-care. So how do you feel that both resonance and vibration relate to self-care?
Well, if you realize that everything is vibration and everything is energy, and you want to nurture or cultivate or curate the most amazing experience for yourself that you can, you're going to want to learn to manipulate your energy. And when I say manipulate, that's not a pejorative term. Manipulate, the definition I'm using there is to handle adroitly. And so I'm going to, if I know how to change from being in a crap ass mood to being in a better one, I'm going to employ that. Or, and here's another or for you, or I'm going to allow and accept that I'm going to revel in that mud and just like a pig, and then be done with it. So all kinds of ways it puts me in the control seat as opposed to feeling bandied about by the winds of, oh, that is affecting me. Yeah, and what do you want to feel, and where are you currently feeling it? Because chances are whatever you want to feel is somewhere in your body, because you couldn't even know you wanted to feel it if you'd never experienced it. Not possible.
My last caveat to that question is also, how does being an empath relate to
Ugh.
vibration?
All right. So that's really like, got to have another whole podcast for that. So being
Yeah.
an empath, at least how I'm an empath, has to do with being able to, so everybody knows what it is like to be empathic. Oh, I feel for you. And
Sure.
when we say that in a normal person, we're really talking about, I can put myself in your shoes. I have felt something like that before, or I can imagine what it would feel like, right? That's what empathic is. What an empath is very, very different, at least me, is very different in that I feel inside of me whatever is going on for you or the room or this or that. And until I learn to distinguish between me and not me, back to this fear and not fear, it was really debilitating because I was awash in emotions that were not mine, that I thought were. So, the little adage, don't believe everything you think. I wish I would have known that a little bit younger. But I didn't really understand any of that until I was in my 30s. So I spent a lot of years with depression and other things. And probably a lot of that was not me. When I began to learn the difference between me and not me, that allows me to go, oh, not me. I can put it over here. I can turn the volume down. It doesn't go away. My ability to discern that doesn't go away. My ability to control it, label it, tell it what it is, and move it over here does. And that frees up my energetic resonance. And I don't know if I just went off on a tangent or if it even answered the question you asked there. I just,
Oh, that's okay. You did, and that was great. Thank you so much. We're actually going to be talking about boundaries and being an empath in an episode later in the year. And so earlier you expressed how to shift vibration. So I was wondering if you have an example of how you were in one state and you recognized it and what you did to shift into another state that was more towards what you were looking for.
uh, let's say I'm angry or frustrated, which I was this morning because my laptop broke and all my notes were on there and I couldn't get, and now I'm going to have to work on my iPad. I don't want to work on my iPad. So I'm in this really gritty, icky sort of state. And then I think about my nephew, Eric. And immediately a smile comes to my face. I know I'm going to see him tomorrow. So it's like I'm now in a different state. It is that quick. Doesn't take me any time. There are things where it does take me time and where maybe I'm got something going on at work that bothers me or whatever. It's when I fail to identify what do I want to feel instead that puts me in a bind. And it's where I begin using my thinking self versus my feeling self to discern. So don't believe what you think, or don't believe everything that you think. So it's getting into, what is my body telling me? Where's that located? What do I need to do? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do instead?
Mhm. Do you have any tips for how to assess your own vibration level?
Yeah, I think that's really going to be individual to every person. Back to my note about everyone creating their own decoder ring. Like, I can generally say, oh, I tune into here and I feel this there. And those are generally those kinds of things, whatever that is. But that might not be true for you. That might not be true for the person next to you. So it's generalities, and it's, there's a certain amount of faith and trust that comes with knowing what your sensations are telling you in the body. As an example, I'm kind of a human lie detector. So I absolutely know when someone is lying to themselves or to me or both. And it's a very disconcerting thing to have, but I have visceral reactions when I know somebody's telling the truth, or when they speak in their own truth, in their authenticity. The hairs on the back of my arm stand up. Like, that's the first one. So there are a number of things. But as you think about your own self, there are ways that oh, this isn't. Like, you come across somebody and you get a feeling in the pit of your stomach, or you get, like, what those are. And as you bring them conscious, because they're unconscious processes, as you begin to bring them conscious, you can write them down if that works for you, but begin to know what that indicates for you. And so then you just become a little reader board for the things that are happening around you from a sensory point of view. I might point out, again, this is not a thinking thing. We can cut your head off from the top up. This is all about the body.
Absolutely. And how I have learned that part of my decoder ring, which you've helped me figure out over time, I learn about how I'm feeling through feeling either expanded or contracted.
Bingo.
And I notice that I can get a little guarded and closed it down, and I want this to be perfection, or I want this to this way, and I start getting rigid, and I just really start to feel this. I'm closed in, I'm closed off, I'm shut down, my wall is up, and it doesn't I realize I don't feel the flow coming in. And so then I blow my arms open and I say, okay, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I can feel myself expand, and that's allowing for me energy
And
to roll through.
and as I'm listening to that, your whole tone of voice changed. If you go back to this and listen to this, when you were talking about constricting, your voice was constricting, your
Yeah.
everything was constricting. When you threw your arms out, you opened the aperture, and then everything. And the other point about that is, when you're constricting inside, you're actually hiding your heart.
Mm.
And that is your primary vehicle that senses vibration. It is
Mm-hmm.
the one that gets vibration first before anything else. It goes heart, gut, brain.
Mm.
Just FYI. And so when you go, it doesn't feel right in my heart, or I got this gut sensation, those are things you should learn to trust. I don't use should that often, but those are things you should learn to trust, because they are your internal tools that help you navigate. When you find yourself stuck in, I think this, that's when you should go time out. Let's go breathe a bit. Let's go get in nature. Going back to another way to shift vibration is being out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just mention something about amplitude.
Okay.
So amplitude, when you're talking about vibration, is the level at which that vibration is. You can think loudness, or you can think intensity.
Mm.
So when you're talking about two vibrations coming together, the one that is got the highest amplitude, the most intensity, is going to be the one that can influence the others. It's why a person in a bad mood can influence an entire room. They have the highest amplitude. Conversely, somebody like well, I can't think of a person at the moment, but somebody with a very high vibratory level, at the level of love or above, somebody like a, um, well, Thich Nhat Hanh comes to mind.
Sure.
When you're around that person who is so congruent in their own energy and can really transmute that, it feels different being around them.
Mm.
You begin to pick up that optimism, that joy, that whatever it is that they're radiating, there's some of that in you, and you're going to start vibrating at that.
And that's essentially resonance, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And so going back to the decoder ring and the felt sense, it's, they also talk about the gut feeling. That's also your intuition speaking to you.
Yep. There's a number of ways that my intuition comes in. I have been working with it for a long time, so I have what I call incomings, and they are frequency, vibration, usually words that come through me from my guides and elsewhere that is speaking a truth that I have either asked about or somebody I'm working with has asked about. So yeah, that stuff's real, comes through.
Well, this has been fabulous. Deborah, do you have any closing thoughts or final thoughts for vibration?
I think the thing, like I said, going back to you're either, or actually to your point, you're either constricting or you're opening the aperture. And you're going to have a lot more fun experiences in life by opening the aperture and understanding when you need to close the aperture because there is something fearful, really, not something you're making up, that's in front of you, beside you, around you. So it's tuning into the body and figuring out your decoder ring. And it's not something that I can do for you. It's not even something you can do for anybody. I really do believe it's an internal journey. There are people that can help you. You help people. I help people. There are people that can help you on that. But essentially, it is you saying to yourself, and this is where you are saying something, like, hey, I want to understand myself better. And I want to be able to be agile and fluid in the world to respond appropriately whenever I can. Understanding we're human, we're going to make mistakes. So it's really understanding, getting back to understanding your own self, figuring out what that means for you, and then how you want to put that out. And not hanging out with people that whose vibration you don't vibe with. Understanding that's fair. You don't, unless you're working with them, you don't got to be in that room. Let your
A-
finger do the walking.
Absolutely. And that's one point that I like to make about being a fierce heart. Sometimes being a fierce heart means putting up those boundaries and saying, look, this isn't healthy for me. I have to make a choice about this.
Yes, and I do want to make a point about boundaries. Thank you for bringing that up because boundary. So we're talking about a lot of openness. We're talking about a lot of feeling. We're talking about a lot of putting out there. What do I feel? All of that. Okay, let's talk about appropriate boundaries. So when you're an empath, by nature, you don't really have very good boundaries because you can perceive everything and you don't know if it's you or not you until you start learning how to make those delineations. So you definitely want to understand what appropriate boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
And that is unfortunately sort of a learn as you go kind of situation. But for me as an empath, I need to actually put up boundaries, make sure I have them every day. And and for me, boundaries are like I imagine a line of demarcation anywhere from 2 feet to 10 feet all the way around my body. And when I say 2 feet to 10 feet, depends on how I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I need greater boundaries. In other words, my skills and abilities to perceive are so strong that day, I need to put boundaries out tighter so that I can see sooner or feel sooner, not me, let it go. Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so having appropriate boundaries is a must, and learning what those are is a foundational piece. Thank you for asking that boundary question because it's huge.
Absolutely. And later on in the year, we will have an entire episode about boundaries, both energetically, emotionally, physically, and boundaries with the outside world. So that would be a really interesting one to get into later. All right, Deborah, thank you so much for your time. That wraps up our episode, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Well, that's our episode for this week. Feel free to leave any comments you might have about your experience with vibration to keep the conversation going. Please like and subscribe. It helps this podcast more than you know. And you can always follow us, the Fierce Heart Alliance, on Facebook and Instagram for weekly inspiration. Next week is our integration episode where I share a channeling and we take a deeper dive into the virtue of vibration. Take care, Fierce Hearts. Till next time.